I I came in the country in 1986. I used to live. I grew up in Barbados, um, and I got to know Nana Bonsu, Barry Edwards, as he was known, in the pretty soon after I came here. Um, I used to come to events quite a lot, yeah, and was always interested in history and ideas and things of that nature. And I was always very inspired by Mr. Edwards. Um, he always kind of encouraged, and he had one of his favorite sayings was, the Edward Blyden saying, "Every race has a soul, which finds expression through institutions, and if you destroy those institutions, you destroy the soul of the people." He always emphasized that, at events, and that I always really remember him through that, yeah. And I remember I joined the police in about 1990, and it was something that I thought really long and hard about, because at that time, before leading up to that, there was a lot of conflict, obviously, between the police and the community, and it was something that I kind of agonized a bit about, yeah. But I felt that going into that organization with my eyes open wide, yeah, that you could not necessarily make a difference, but felt a lot stronger in my own principles going into the criminal justice arena. And I think the influence of people like Mr. Edwards, Nana Bonsu, really, really made a big difference to me in terms of, trying to make a difference within those organizations. I became instrumental in establishing the Black Police Association here in Manchester. Obviously, I became the president of the National Black Police Association, and a lot of that, I would say, was influenced by Nana Bonsu, in no small measure, because it was all about the idea of building institutions that define our reality as a people, and not necessarily, following, the line that people necessarily expect you to follow when you join organizations. Because I remember one of the things, a conversation that we had. Several people involved in the conversation about the police and about institutions, and I remember Mr. Edwards said that, well, which organization is not racist in this country? Do you discourage people from looking at medicine? And do you discourage people from looking at the arts? Yeah, because all of these institutions are institutionally racist. Yeah, and therefore, it's more about the mindset that you take within these, organizations. So he was very, very influential to me as an individual, and as a professional. I don't think I had that relationship on a one-on-one level, in terms of necessarily his radical ideas. I mean, I'm not opposed to radical ideas, because one thing you have to accept when you're functioning under institutional racism, under oppression, that any act is revolutionary, regardless of how small that act is. Yeah, just to say, well, I don't want to live under these conditions, is revolutionary. Might not necessarily come across that much now, but going back 15, 20 years ago, there were black organizations that were considered threatening to the state, and particularly looking at the criminal justice arena. He is thinking, his ideas, the things that he encouraged the community towards. Yes, they were revolutionary, but institutional racism and the conditions that that black people face in this country. I've never had any difficulty in squaring those ideas with the fact that that I was working within an organization, because as long as you're strong in your principles, and that's something that I've heard come out of his mouth, so there was never a conflict there, so far as I was concerned, anyway. One of the big ways that I got to understand Nana Bonsu and what he was about was through, he used to sell books, and I always have been, a big reader, and setting aside, my own profession, I always and he always encouraged the idea that that knowledge is something that's there to be shared, and I think even through the Saturday school, and the way that he kind of carried that for a lot of years and encouraged that, I think that's a big part of his legacy. The Saturday school is still going now, and this Saturday school in Calmar Road in particular, and the sort of flavor, the emphasis on knowledge of self, that will be a big part of his legacy, and that's something that I, on a personal level, have always supported, because I think that when you look back to the period of this sort of late in the 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of violence in our community among our young people, and and I've stood and heard people like Nana Bonsu always making the argument that actually, if we knew who we were, we wouldn't be killing one another, we wouldn't be violent towards one another, and I think that simple message, I can see the people who've come through under Nana Bonsu, promoting that message, and that message, is carried on throughout the community, and certainly here in Manchester, there's been, the level of violence has gone down. Actually, I from what I've observed over the years, and I think that in a big measure, that has had a lot to do with the way the community itself rallies around particular ideas, encouraging mentorship and things of that nature. And these are the things that Miss Edwards, Nana Bonsu, really encouraged over a long period of time, And in terms of community development, sometimes people get frustrated, but it takes a long time for ideas to filter through. And I could see a lot of his, Mr. Edwards, his ideas filtering through, even to this day, I've already give you a couple examples. The Saturday school, encouraging, nurturing institutions. These are things that, that he encouraged over a long period of time, and was really consistent in the message that he always brought to our community, that if we knew who we were, we wouldn't behave towards one another in the way that we often do. The big thing for me is about about building institutions. Is about creating institutions within institutions. That whether whether you look at medicine, for example, yeah, if that we shouldn't step into institutions blindly. That actually, that even within professions, we've got to create a space to define our own reality. Yeah. So I mean, I can give you examples of that in the criminal justice system. For example, if you're in policing or in the wider criminal justice system now, you look at the disproportionality around stop and search, for example, deaths in custody. Is that when you're operating within those organizations, you have to get together as black people and create situations where you can challenge the system itself rather than simply being a part of the system. Yeah, and that applies whether you're in the criminal justice system, whether you're in social work. And I've seen them influences on black people in this community, creating associations, yeah, that can challenge, because many of these institutions simply don't function for black people. They don't work for black people. And therefore, one of the message of people like Nana Bonsu is to build your own institutions that can define your own reality. So I think that's one of the big things, influences for me, so far as Miss Nana Bonsu is concerned. Yeah.